All right, so we've got this pretty unusual situation going on right now.
Yeah.
It's March 2025, and Senator Steve Daines, he just went to China, and he's the very first U.S. politician to actually visit since President Trump started his second term back in January.
Big deal.
It is a big deal. I mean, think about it. You've got this period of silence between the two countries.
Yeah.
You know, and meanwhile, in the background, you've got these tariff disputes still happening.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole relationship is just super complicated.
For sure.
So right off the bat, I'm thinking, why this trip? Why now? You know?
Yeah.
And what does this even tell us about where things stand between the U.S. and China?
Well, that lack of any kind of official contact at a high level.
Yeah.
That's exactly what makes this whole thing so interesting. I mean, for months, basically, all the usual diplomatic channels have been quiet. It's been radio silence.
Yeah.
So Daines showing up like this.
Yeah.
It's not just another trip on the calendar.
Right.
It's way more significant because of all that quiet that came before it.
Definitely. And that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Okay.
Senator Daines' trip to China.
Right.
We've been going through all these recent news reports and briefings to really try to understand, what was he trying to do over there?
Yeah.
What's going on with China? What are they thinking?
What are their motivations?
Exactly. And then, like, what could happen next?
Right.
You know, what kind of impact could this have on the whole U.S.-China relationship?
Big picture stuff.
Yeah, we want to get that big picture without getting bogged down in every little detail.
Makes sense.
Now, if we bring this back down to earth for a second.
Okay.
This isn't just something happening, you know, way over there.
Right.
Whether you're involved in business that deals with other countries,
Sure.
or you're interested in global politics, or you're just trying to figure out what's affecting the world economy.
Yeah.
The relationship between the U.S. and China, it matters.
Yeah.
So understanding these moments like this where they might be trying to reconnect,
Right.
it's more and more important.
Totally agree.
So let's start with what we were calling, you know, that diplomatic vacuum.
Yeah.
It's really noticeable. No U.S. politician has been to China since January 2025.
Wow.
That's a big gap.
It is.
It means there hasn't been that direct communication at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
So what made that lack of contact so important leading up to Daines' trip?
Well, if you look at the reports, they all emphasize this absence.
Mm-hmm.
Like the New York Times, they even said that Daines was casting himself as a go-between.
Interesting.
Which I think sums it up perfectly.
Yeah.
You know, without the usual back and forth between officials.
Yeah.
He was basically stepping in to bridge this huge communication gap.
It seems like China was ready for that bridge, too.
Oh, yeah.
They were really looking to talk to the U.S. again.
For sure.
And the elephant in the room is those tariffs.
Oh, absolutely.
They're feeling the pressure from those tariffs, and they want to avoid any more coming from Washington.
Definitely. And Premier Li Qiang, what he said when he met with Daines,
right,
that was pretty telling. It was reported in The Guardian and Reuters.
Uh-huh.
He basically said they want to choose dialogue over confrontation, win-win cooperation over zero-sum competition.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds a lot like trying to cool things down, especially when it comes to the economy.
It does make you wonder what else is going on in China right now, beyond just the tariffs that's making them so eager to talk.
Right, good point. There's this guy, Wu Jinbo, from Fudan University.
Okay.
And he said something interesting in the New York Times.
Yeah.
He thinks China wanted Daines to take a message back to Trump.
Like what?
Basically, we want to talk. Let's not make things worse. And think about the timing.
Okay.
It's almost April, and that's when the U.S. is supposed to finish its review of that Phase 1 trade deal.
Right.
And The Guardian and Reuters, they both said that there's a real chance of new tariffs.
On countries that are taxing U.S. imports.
Exactly. So for China, it makes sense to try and talk things out right now.
It makes sense. Now, on the U.S. side, Daines didn't just show up out of nowhere.
Yeah, he didn't.
He met with President Trump before the trip.
Oh, really?
And it seems like he had a specific message to deliver.
Yeah.
Straight from Trump.
What was it?
You guessed it.
America first.
America first.
Classic.
And all the reports agree that a big priority for Trump and for Daines was this whole thing with fentanyl precursors.
Okay.
Daines told China they need to do something to stop these chemicals from getting to the Mexican cartels.
Wow.
And the briefing documents we have really emphasize how seriously the Trump administration is taking this.
So it sounds like they really want to see some action from China on this.
Yeah, and you can hear it in Trump's own words, too. He said, quote, "The seriousness of the fentanyl issue."
Powerful words.
It shows you just how much this is a sticking point between the two countries.
Yeah, and for Daines going over there as this go-between, delivering this message straight from the president, that gives his visit a lot of weight.
Makes sense.
It's not just about being diplomatic. It's about a very real problem.
It sounds like Daines wanted to do even more than just deliver messages, though.
Oh, yeah. What else?
The reports say he was trying to set up a face-to-face meeting between President Trump and President Xi Jinping.
Wow, that's ambitious.
Yeah, it's a big goal.
It is, and there's a quote from Daines where he says it directly.
Okay.
He said his visit is, quote, the first step to arrange and set up the next step, which will be a very important meeting between President Xi and President Trump.
So that was his main objective.
Sounds like it.
But the reports also point out that it might not be that easy.
Really? Why not?
Well, there's this expert Yun Sun from the Stimson Center.
Okay.
And she said in the New York Times that people in Beijing are skeptical.
About what?
About whether Trump really wants to meet with Xi.
Interesting. Why would they think that?
Well, she says it's because there hasn't been any of the usual preparation.
Like what?
You know, the lower level contacts that usually happen before a big summit.
Right.
Those haven't been happening.
So they're thinking if Trump was serious, he would have had people laying the groundwork.
Yeah, exactly.
I see their point.
So even though Daines is trying to make this meeting happen, there are definitely some doubts and obstacles to overcome.
Makes sense.
Oh.
So while he's trying to create an opening, there's still some work to do to convince China that it's for real.
Exactly. Now, what about China's take on all this?
Right.
Especially these key issues that came up during the visit.
Yeah.
Like, with the fentanyl crisis, they seem to have a different perspective than the U.S.
Definitely. The New York Times and the FAQs, they lay out China's official position.
Okay.
They're saying the fentanyl problem is mainly because of demand in the U.S.
Oh, so they're putting the responsibility on us.
Basically, and they're also saying that they've already done a lot to stop these chemicals from being exported. And to prove their point, China's cabinet, they even put out a whole report about the measures they've taken.
And what about the U.S.?
U.S. officials are apparently looking into it.
So it's like they're looking at the same problem from totally different angles.
Yeah. The U.S. is focused on where the precursors are coming from. And China is saying, hey, it's your demand that's driving this.
Yeah.
And we're already doing our part to control the supply.
It just shows you how tough it is to find a solution when both sides see things so differently.
Absolutely. And when it comes to trade, China's concerns are pretty clear.
What are they worried about?
Well, those tariffs that Trump already put in place, the 20% ones, those are a big worry for them. And then the possibility of even more tariffs. That's definitely something they're thinking about, as reported in the briefing documents.
Makes sense those tariffs have a real impact on their economy.
They do.
And knowing that more could be coming, that definitely adds fuel to the fire.
It does. It makes them want to talk things out even more.
Right, and maybe find a way to avoid those new tariffs.
Exactly. Now let's talk about Senator Daines himself.
Okay.
His role in this whole thing is pretty significant.
Yeah, it seems like his close relationship with President Trump is a big factor here.
Definitely. The New York Times and the briefing documents, they highlight how much Daines supports Trump. In fact, he was the first Republican Senate leader to endorse Trump for his second term.
Wow.
So that level of loyalty and connection,
that
probably makes him someone China wants to talk to.
Like, he has a special kind of access that other politicians might not have right now.
Yeah, that's the idea. And that expert Wu Jinbo we talked about.
Right.
He said that China is definitely trying to use that to their advantage.
How so?
They want to figure out what Trump is really thinking about China.
Interesting.
Does he still want a trade deal? What would it look like? They see Daines as a way to get some answers.
Yeah, makes sense. And it's not like Daines is a stranger to China.
Right, he's been there before.
He lived there for 6 years back in the 90s.
Wow.
When he was working for Procter & Gamble. And he's been back several times as a senator.
So he's not going in blind?
No, definitely not. That experience probably helps him understand China better.
It probably does.
And maybe it even gives him some credibility with the Chinese officials.
Yeah, it's not his first rodeo with U.S.-China relations.
Right, and that experience probably shapes how he approaches things.
Probably. Now, one thing that really stands out about Daines' trip is that meeting he had with Premier Li Qiang. And he brought a whole group of American business executives with him.
It wasn't just a casual visit?
No, it was definitely intentional.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty deliberate move.
It does.
Yeah.
The Guardian Reuters, the briefing documents, they all talk about this meeting and who was there.
Okay.
It was a pretty impressive group. We're talking CEOs from major companies.
Right, too.
Like Qualcomm, Pfizer Cargill.
Wow.
And even a top guy from Boeing.
And Daines made a point of saying how much experience these companies have in China.
Right. He said 275 years combined.
That's huge.
It is It shows you how strong those economic ties are.
Yeah, even with all the political tension.
It makes you wonder why those companies specifically.
Yeah, what do Qualcomm, Pfizer, Boeing, what do they represent when it comes to the U.S. and China and their economies?
Those companies, they're all leaders in key areas where the U.S. has a big presence in China.
Okay.
Like Qualcomm, they're huge in semiconductors.
Right.
Which are crucial for China's tech industry.
Uh-huh.
Then you've got Pfizer. They're a major pharmaceutical company.
Yeah.
And China's healthcare needs are growing all the time.
I sense. And what about Boeing?
They're a giant in aviation.
Right.
And that's another sector with massive potential for growth in China.
So even with the political problems, they're still deeply connected when it comes to business.
Absolutely. And the fact that Premier Li even met with these executives.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, especially because reports say he's not meeting with other foreign CEOs at the China Development Forum.
Not this year, not last year.
Right. So there's definitely a reason why he made time for this particular group.
It seems like they really wanted to connect with a senator who's close to Trump.
Uh-huh.
And some big names in American business all at once.
It could be a way for China to keep those economic relationships strong.
Yeah.
Even while things are rocky on the political side.
So even though the politics are tough,
yeah,
China's sending a signal that they still value doing business with these U.S. companies.
That's one way to look at it. Attracting foreign investment and keeping trade flowing.
Yeah.
Those are big priorities for China, especially with all the pressure from U.S. tariffs.
Right, and with all the changes they're making to their own economy.
Exactly. This meeting could be part of a bigger effort to reassure American businesses.
And to show them that they still want to work with them.
Yeah. And it wasn't just Daines and the CEOs at the meeting.
Right, there were other people there too.
Yeah, the U.S. Embassy's charge d'affaires, Annie Vu, she was there. And some high-ranking Chinese officials, too. Like the commerce minister and the head of China's state planning agency.
Wow, so it was a pretty high-level gathering.
It was. It wasn't just a casual chat.
Definitely not.
It shows you how seriously both sides were taking this.
Okay, so besides fentanyl and the trade stuff, it sounds like Daines also brought up some smaller but still annoying trade issues.
Right, like what?
Well, he talked about Montana beef imports again.
That's been an issue for a while.
It has. For our listeners who might not know, what are non-tariff barriers?
Okay, so those are basically things that make it harder to trade, even if there aren't any actual tariffs.
Give me an example.
Like maybe there are really strict inspection rules or quotas that limit how much beef can come into China.
Okay.
In the case of Montana beef, there have been times when China just stopped imports altogether.
Why?
They gave different reasons, but Montana politicians say those reasons aren't really valid.
So they're saying it's just a way to block trade.
Exactly.
So it sounds like they covered a lot of ground in these talks.
They did big issues and smaller ones.
And we can't forget about that deadline coming up in early April.
Right.
That's when the U.S. is supposed to wrap up its review of the Phase 1 trade deal. And that's when we could see those new tariffs.
That's definitely adding to the tension.
It is. Both sides are watching each other really closely.
For sure.
So these early meetings, like Daines' trip, they become even more important because nobody knows what's going to happen next.
Absolutely. All right, let's recap.
Okay.
Senator Daines' trip to China. It's basically a lifeline between the U.S. and China.
Yeah.
Especially because the usual ways of talking to each other aren't really working right now.
Right.
And China clearly wants to talk, especially with those potential tariff increases looming.
Definitely. The fentanyl issue, that's still a major problem for the U.S.
Yep.
And Daines made sure China heard Trump's concerns loud and clear.
Straight from the source.
And then the big goal for Daines was to try and set up a meeting between Trump and Xi.
Yeah, he wants to get those two in the same room.
Exactly. So that's the gist of what happened.
You got it. This whole visit really shows you just how messy the relationship is between the U.S. and China. You got economic competition, political tension,
right,
and then the need to find ways to communicate even when it's tough.
Yeah, it's complicated. But we have to remember.
What's that?
This trip, it's just one step.
Right.
In a much bigger story.
That's true. The underlying issues.
Yeah.
They haven't gone away.
So here's something to think about.
Okay, I'm listening.
You've got these deep differences between the U.S. and China. And it's hard for them to talk to each other officially right now.
Right.
So is there any real chance that things will calm down between them?
That's a good question.
And can these less formal channels, like Daines' trip, can they actually make a difference? That's something to consider as this whole situation keeps unfolding.
Definitely. It's a complex relationship with a lot of moving parts.
For sure.
We'll have to see what happens next.
Absolutely.